Okay, we'll get started. Well, wow, there's a lot of people here. Well, thank you guys for coming, and for those of you who are watching remotely, thank you for watching. I'm Grid, or Scott, I'll answer to either one, and I'm going to be doing a talk on active defense for web applications, making an attacker's life difficult. Or, ideally, you want your web applications to say this. When, like you can insert the typical Samuel L. Jackson catchphrase, hack this, mother, and I'll leave it blank for those of you who are underage. But I'm a husband. My wife is here supporting me. Thank you. I'm an avid diver, so if you know any good scuba sites, hit me up. I'm an info security analyst. I work for Company X. My supervisor asked me not to divulge where I work, although it's a good place. I'm proud to say they're very security aware and security responsible. And I'll have these slides as well as some other notes and notes generally from the conference up at my GitHub page there. Unfortunately, somebody took Grid, G-R-I-D, before I could grab it, which was kind of a bummer. But going right into it, I'll go through some theory of the active defense. It's going to be down-to-earth stuff. I don't like the hand-wavy, really theoretical type stuff. I can and have done policy work, but I'm an in-the-weeds guy. I came up from security through the application side, so that's where my forte is. These will be practical things that you can do to cause annoyance, delays, and frustration to your attackers or your pen testers. There'll be a mix of items that you can do regardless of where you are in IT, whether you're a system admin, a DBA, a programmer, what have you. Most of it, as I said, since I came up through the application ranks, that's kind of where I tend to fall on the programming side. A lot of it will be .NET based, since that's where I spend most of my time, but you can generally take the principles and apply them to anything, whether you're doing Perl, Python, what have you, if it's web-based. And I'll leave some time at the end for some questions and comments. So, going right in, what is it? Well, there's the wiki entry if you want to look it up. But basically, anything that you do that makes an attacker's life harder. Active defense assumes you will be attacked. Usually involves deception and misdirection, things like that. Doing it well requires you to get into the head of an attacker. So those of you, if I get a show of hands who are red teamers, any red teamers here? Yeah, a few blue teamers? Okay, just run-of-the-mill programmers, IT, anybody in the audience? That okay, yeah. So kind of getting into the head of the attacker will help you do active defense more effectively, I feel. It borrows from the military. We all know that your web applications, whenever you throw it online, they're going to be under attack. You can look through your logs and see ridiculous numbers of entries about stuff that's targeted, or you can tell it's just run by script kiddies. For instance, if you've got a IIS site stood up and people are throwing up PHP stuff, looking for PHP my admin, I see a lot of heads nodding. It's just noise in your logs. So, there's crap tons of attacks going on all the time. We all know that. So, should you attack the attacker? Well, listen to Leo, absolutely not. The law, and I'm no attorney, I don't claim to be, but the law is pretty clear on that. If you attack back, then you're in the wrong. So I definitely don't advocate that. Certainly not in the U.S. Your mileage may vary if you're in Canada or somewhere else. But, frustrating, deceiving the attacker, I won't do the Three Stooges nook because I'm not very good at it. But certainly, yeah, you want to fool them. You want to get them off their track, get them off their game. So when do you do it? In my opinion, you can do it anytime, but I think it's most useful after you've gotten your applications in good, I guess air quotes there, shape security-wise. You've done your testing, maybe you've done a pen test and gone through the results, and they've said, oh, you need to do this and this to shore things up, or you're missing some input validation. When you've got your basics down and you're comfortable with it, then at that point, you may want to take the next step and put some deception into your applications. I'm not saying like start writing in spaghetti code and all that sort of stuff, but just little bits of things here and there to drag the attacker off his path. So, the theory of it. To mount a successful attack, and those of you who are red teamers know, you need info, as much of it as you can get, because you're coming in cold to something. You don't know what it is. You may have a general idea based on extensions, what language it is, or what platform it's running on, but you don't know what you don't know. So you got to look around. And this is definitely kind of a self-answering question. What if you get false info? Starts leading you down the wrong path. Attack tools, anything written out there, the Metasploit framework, barbecue SQL map, all those things, they're written just like regular software. They assume certain database coding and platform standards. What happens if you don't follow the standards? Now, like I said, I'm not advocating writing spaghetti code, but if you do a few little things, that's enough to start dragging an attacker, off the path, and that gives you the advantage, because the more false info you can feed to them, the less reliable it's going to be for them going down the way as they start scanning, enumerating, and that sort of thing. Many tools use a fingerprint database to identify targets. Nmap's got a massive amount of OS fingerprints for practically any device out there. So, keep that in mind when you're thinking about active defense. Predictable resource names and locations. Bad guys love these. They always hunt for that sort of thing. Derb has a Derb or Derbuster, those kind of tools. They have huge word lists of common things that, regardless of platform, they may find in IIS, the LAMP stack, for instance, anything like that. So don't be predictable. Change your defaults. Block traffic from unfriendly IP net blocks. Like I said up there, some I know have coworkers in some businesses who just simply blacklist the entire net blocks of Russia, China, North Korea, any place that they're not doing business. I mean, I hate to single out countries, but if you see a lot of bad traffic coming from particular net blocks, what else can you do other than just kind of sinkhole it or black hole it, firewall it off? That might work depending on your business rules and where you do business. If you're just a local concern, maybe just dealing in one region of the country, or just the U.S., Canada, for instance, blacklisting, entire net blocks might work for you. But some things for the system server admins and DBAs in the audience, using IIS, just configure it to return the same error page on all status codes. That will at least slow someone down. But sift your web server logs. There's going to be stuff in there that people will just bang on and bang on and bang on. And if you throw that stuff out in your web root, that'll at least cause their tools to hit on it. They'll at least have to look at it. I mean, you would be silly not to overlook something that your tool returned a positive result on, which will at least slow down the attacker. This third bullet point, I've just started using where I work, and thankfully we haven't had any hits on it yet. But put some watermark or canary data in in some of your tables. Real-looking stuff that you can at least get a heads up on in case of a compromise or a paste bin data dump, something like that, or something traveling outbound that just shouldn't be. There are tables and stuff that you use internally that would not be used externally, like your employee relations table, HR related stuff. If you've got a rule in your IDS or IPS that looks for this canary data, then you know that something squirrely's going on. Using a honeypot, home built or off the shelf. Kippo and Cowrie are good honeypots that you can use, but of course those always come with a caveat. Be sure you configure them to act like a real server. Otherwise, it'll be fairly easy for an attacker to spot those. Say, oh, okay, this is fake. He's trying to draw me off the track, so I just need to ignore this. But this last one, I've personally had some pretty good success with, putting spaces in your database table names. I've personally seen that cause a lot of problems with different attack tools, just because nobody ever expects to see a space in a database table name. But if you're using, particularly if you're on the Microsoft stack and you're using SQL Server, just remember to use brackets around those tables so you can still reference them right. Pardon me. So some more practical stuff. as I said before, if you provide false info, the villains will make false assumptions. In my personal view and experience, if you make it too obvious, your pen tester or your attacker is probably not going to believe it. So you want to feed them dribs and drabs of bad data so that they end up making false assumptions after receiving enough bad or squirrely looking data that you provided for them. So, an unlinked directory with some fake juicy info in it, anything in a Derb's default word list will do. You can nest a few directories for better effect. So when Derb makes a hit on one, then it's going to drill down and it's going to keep going. So that will at least buy you some time if you can, if you see something weird in your logs, saying, okay, somebody's scanning me now. I know something's up here. Those particular snippets I see very often in web server logs at work. The XML, I think it was that last one, the admin module built-in XML. That seems to be a really popular one lately for some reason. I don't really know why. The Iridium 3D PHP, I saw that a lot on an IIS box. So my guess is somebody's just running an automated tool looking for that one. This second main bullet point was done quite by accident. There was a now retired lady who did that, and I found out that files in your web root, ReconNG looks for those by default. I think I see the guy in the back that wrote ReconNG, which yes, he just waved his hand. Thank you for coming. ReconNG is cool, by the way. So if you see that guy, shake his hand. Putting fake comments in HTML can draw people off the track. A fake Google Dork result, you can get all kinds of good ones from the Google hacking database. So kind of leveraging the tools of the bad guys to help you out. So this is ideally what you want when villains start poking at your website. So I personally would not want to be that guy because he looks like he's about to crap his pants. So some more fakery here. Unused hidden fields in your ASPX pages won't interfere with the user experience. It won't tie up your programmer's time too much. Using a fave icon that doesn't match your platform. Number 3 is fairly obvious, but sometimes people forget it. Change your X powered by HTTP response header. A useless but interesting HTTP response header in your web server. Setting a cookie on the server side that's not used. Somebody's gonna look at that because it's like, oh, it's a cookie. This thing, what is this? Using special characters in your form field names. I'm actually stealing this idea from a vendor, and I don't honestly know how well this works if you're using Visual Studio, but they did this, and it caused me a pain in the neck to try to figure this out and actually make the tools that I was using work. So I thought that was kind of cool. And like the bullet point says there, you could even go one step further with an HTML encoded name and put an ampersand LT at the end or greater than, something like that. Fake generator meta tags. Nmap has a script that looks for those, so you could plant something like that in your HTML. Some more fakery. If you go through stored procedures and use them within your database, particularly SQL Server, the Microsoft stack is what I've worked with most of my career, so I fall back on that. But name the user admin, DB admin, something like that. If for whatever reason an attacker manages to get through and he can look at and see what your database user is doing, yes. Oh, okay. So if the attacker sees that, they're likely going to assume the existence of an overprivileged account, and they're at least going to waste time trying to escalate privileges to something that may not even escalate. So that's kind of sneaky. Actually fooled a vendor on that one. Using a non-standard character set with an HTTP request header of accept char set. can help. By default, I don't think SQL Map accounts for that. You have to use a specific flag to tell SQL Map to look at something other than that's not a standard character set. Adding an unused query string parameter is a goodie. Started using that at work some, and that's caused some issues with some vendor testing that we've had done on some of our software. They keep saying, well, what's going on with this query string parameter? You know, we keep banging away at it. It's like, well, it doesn't do anything. Ha! So I was kind of proud of it.
Sorry, folks, we had a video glitch at this point, but audio and video should resume shortly. Sorry for the inconvenience.
Data and just throw it out there. Burp Suite uses the legal statute symbol, you know, that weird looking double S, overlapping double S, as a tag for insertable payload points, attack points. If you use those in hidden fields and stuff, that's going to give Burp Suite problems. So just little things like that when you do assessments. If you're a red team or a blue team or whatever, kind of keep an eye on and, you know, make some notes and stick those in your report. Hey, you know, for the client or your internal customer or whatever, try this. This might help raise your game. You know, defense in depth is just that. You build it in layers. I hate to reuse that old saw, but do it in layers. You know, a little bit here and there. It's not going to be a huge investment of time. It's not going to be a huge investment of effort, and you're not going to have to pay out a whole lot of cash to do it. It's something that your programmers and other staff can do. So like I said, I blew through that pretty fast, so there's plenty of time. Questions, comments, anyone? Yes? Yeah, that, and the question was, won't this make your pen testers find fewer vulnerabilities in the system? I actually had a conversation last night with a gentleman who brought that same question up, and yes, that is a good point. That can drag resources away from finding and resolving true problems with input validation or what have you, insufficient patching. So yeah, that is a good point. That's why I mentioned near the beginning, you want to get yourself in a reasonably good shape security-wise before you do this. Otherwise, you're kind of building on a rickety foundation. If your foundation isn't reasonably solid with, you know, good defensive practices, I don't feel this will be as helpful. It will be helpful, and then, like you said, it's gonna drag people off in wrong directions. But you know, once you're in decent shape security-wise and you start doing this, it's it's going to make your defense better, I feel. But yes, that is a very good point. Yes. Oh gosh, yes, it's crucial. Otherwise, your internal staff's going to be lost. As of yet, no, because this is still pretty new at my workplace. But we have warned vendors who we've contracted with to test our stuff. Not everything you see is going to be, I guess, real, for lack of a better word. So, yes, report it. Yes, find it. But just be aware that this is what we do. So, keep that in mind. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it really depends on how you engage with your pen test firm. Do you want them to approach it in more of a black box scenario or a white box or a gray box? So I guess that'll depend from business to business. But yes, that's a good point. Other questions? Yes.
Where do you, in the development life cycle, where do you implement these changes? All the way down at the dev or up closer to prod?
Okay, the question was, where do we implement these active defense changes? Closer to when the code is being initially written or closer to production? Thus far, my best, I guess, results with it, we've played around with it in a variety of places. It seems to work best going closer to production, because that way the testers the internal QA people can see, okay, this is working. When this button is clicked, this event fires, and that's what's doing it. We can verify that that's working. At that point, the programmers will go back and put in the gotchas, so to speak. Yeah, you certainly could. That way, that would help what the gentleman in the back said about your pen testers or internal or external tripping over stuff that isn't there and isn't real. You could do it then, and then apply your active defense to really where it's going to do the most good for the external people, the unfriendlies coming in, not the friendlies that you're hiring to actually find real bugs. So, yeah. Yes?
So have you ever integrated this kind of approach with a tool like App Sensor? Because I'm wondering if you, depending on what kind of framework you have, if you inserted these canary or tripwire fields into your form dynamically, and had any changed or unexpected value in there, be an alert event, you could, it seems like you could catch bad guys really, really quickly that way. And then whatever response mechanism you have, invoke it then.
Yeah, absolutely. The question was, has this been integrated with anything like App Sensor or something like that? No, this was something that thus far we have done entirely manually. Just as things were going to production, throw a hidden field in with the cookie value, and just kind of watch logs and see how many times that cookie may be accessed, or like hidden tags that may point to a fake area on a web server. So if something trips over that hidden tag, you know that a user's not clicking on it because they can't see it. It's a web scraper that's hitting it, for instance. So no, not as of yet, although that is a darn good idea, because as you said, that would help the defender react faster to something that's going on. Yes, the fellow in the hat, I think I saw his hand first. Yeah.
So, I apologize, I missed the first part of your presentation on the properties that you use to track, but are you distinguishing between, taking that content and like HTTP methods and verbs and protocols in terms of, what it says about the adversary, to see the state of those scripts?
I guess a bit. The question was, are you distinguishing between HTTP verbs versus web page content? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason why is that, I've had some pretty large sample data to measure. When you see scanners and automated tools tend to flip a lot of bits into pages.
Oh, yeah, they're very noisy.
Like when you see methods change and things that impact state, that's usually a bad human action. Because if the scanner does that, it blows up its automation anyway.
Yeah.
Have you experimented at all with
Not yet. Honestly, like I said, this is still pretty new for me and the programmers that I work with. So we're still trying to kind of feel our way around. But when I kind of conceived of this talk and I was running it by them, they thought, oh, this might be pretty cool. Just put that in at Derbycon, see if it gets selected, and then honestly look for some feedback from the community, like the questions that you guys are asking. See what other ideas pop out, because everybody has got different experiences. Some people are app strong, like myself, network strong, blue teamers, red teamers. It's all good information. Yes.
Put any canaries in the system so that when they're hit, that you trigger IR events?
Yes, I had mentioned that earlier. Thus far, we've just kind of watermarked data in internal tables, so to speak, those that aren't connected to the web application, just to see if anything starts traversing the wire outside of various zones that we have internally. Thus far, thankfully, knock on wood, that hasn't happened. But we haven't yet set web application canaries, if that makes sense, other than what I've described about hidden tags and directory paths that point to items that really aren't used, just to see if people trip over them. Thus far, the stuff that we've seen in our logs has been, I guess, relatively benign, if you can use that phrase. Fairly obvious stuff that is untargeted, just somebody running a word list through Derb or something, even at a very slow rate to try to avoid detection. It's like, okay, well, this is kind of, cheesy. They're looking for some PHP file when this is running on IIS and .NET. But a lot of these techniques we've only started to use just within the last few weeks, so it really hasn't been long enough for us to get a good sample data of what people are doing when they actually come across this stuff in the wild. It needs to mature some more from my business perspective. Yes.
So have you thought of fun ways to respond when these are detected?
Oh, honestly, no. But my first instinct would be to just sinkhole the IP that it's coming from. So that would just immediately cut you off right then and there. The problem, I guess, with doing that is you can't see what else the attacker's doing, because you've just cut him off at the neck, so to speak. If you could invest the time and the effort, you could stand up a more realistic looking honeypot and to try to seek out some of this stuff and see what the attackers really do with it. But like I said, my first instinct on what to do with this data and how to respond would be to just sinkhole the IP. Sadly, where I work is not a very big place, so we don't have the resources really to devote to that kind of work, but that's certainly a worthwhile pursuit. Yeah, the fellow there?
You seem to have a pretty good mapping of common tools with different techniques. Is that stuff that you researched on your own?
Yeah, I do web application testing internally. So this kind of came about when I was talking to some of our programmers, and quite by accident, really, when the guy said, "Oh, I forgot to take this hidden tag out." This was for testing when we turned this over to QA and you, the security guy, and then we had some back and forth, and it was like, this is kind of interesting. I didn't waste a lot of time with it, but it took my focus off this one input field that I was thinking about, because this hidden tag showed up, and it was like, okay, this might have something. You might be onto something here. This might be a good mistake, because it started to draw me kind of off the path. Not like, there were bells going off saying, "Hey, look here," but something that's like, oh, this is kind of interesting. So then, putting myself in a more blue team frame of mind, it was like, what if I got more than these? What if I got one or two of these? Or what if I got this cookie here that the programmer left in for testing and forgot to take out. With enough of those, just thinking about it from purely from my perspective, that might divert me enough to where I would stop paying attention to the things that are really important. So, going back to the whole diversion, misdirection kind of thing. Yes?
Have you seen any performance ramifications in terms of general volumes of attacks that you're seeing one way or the other?
Not so far, no. We've been experimenting with this in kind of a small scale, so nothing, at least nothing that the network guys have told me about that's really dragging stuff down, or the user base. We haven't gotten any feedback saying, oh, the website's slower now that you did this update. But I guess that's kind of a balance that you have to strike, especially if you're a web server admin. You want to have enough of the active defense type stuff that will slow down or divert an attacker, but you don't want to go overboard. You don't want to, impact there's the whole CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, availability. You don't want to impact your availability overly much. So there's kind of a fine line there. Yeah. Other questions, comments? Yes.
Around Black Hat around 2004, 2005. Gunter Ullman, the Sense Pro stuff from South Africa, and myself and a team of people, all independent. They published a lot of research on doing this, on different ways you could detect bad humans versus scanners, ways you could put in active components into instrumenting web apps, even the honeypots. And so it was talked about for a couple of years, and then it mostly died on the vine. Shape Security implemented some of these techniques in a very rudimentary way. Bot detection, like web bots and disruptive. So that's a very effective way to quickly find the sandbox automation. But there's a lot of other interesting things. Like I mentioned methods. When I see methods flipped, that's, basically there's about a 90% guarantee I have a bad human and a 10% chance I've got somebody ignorant or dumb and a third-party partner
Yeah, I absolutely agree. The fellow in the back made a good point about this. This has been done before, and back in 04 and 05 was well before I got into security. I was still writing code then, so I'm going to have to go back and look at some of that stuff to. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
It's been a long time. I haven't seen much discussion about these techniques, and they actually work pretty darn well. So.
Yeah, well, maybe it's something that you just need to dust it off a bit and update it for the time. Things come and go. Other questions, comments? No? Okay. Well, I appreciate you guys coming. I'll put the slides and other notes up there at that address on GitHub that you can see. My email's up there if you want to holler at me via email. And I'll be around the conference. Stop and chat. Thank you very much.